Welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed that tour of the astrological clock. I think we were all saying that it was actually educational for us as well. It taught us a number of things we didn't know about that very famous landmark. We are going to now head into our final sectoral discussion, and that is IPPU. And so I think I'll have Marketa introduce our sectoral experts.
Okay, so now we have two sectoral experts on industry produce IPPU. Sorry for this. And we start with Zuzana Rošková, who is expert mainly on F-gases and chemical industry. And the second one who will have presentation after Zuzana is Šimon Svoboda, who is dealing mainly with mineral industry and metal industry. So I'm giving the floor to Zuzana.
Thanks for the invitation, and I will start speaking about my presentation, but I can't see it yet.
It's
so,
here.
As what was said, I'm sectoral expert for industrial processes and product use, mostly for these three categories: 2B, which is chemical industry; 2D, which is non-energy fuel and solvent use; and 2F, which is specialized for fluorinated greenhouse gases. The content of this presentation is based, as I said before, for these three categories, and I will speak about how I collect activity data sources, when, and process how it is calculated and when it is reported, and something like this. First is chemical industry. In Czech Republic, we produce ammonia, nitric acid, caprolactam, ethylene, vinyl chloride monomer, carbon black strain, and we also have category 2B others, which contains three calculating processes, which are mostly specialized to ammonia production, especially for natural gas used for this as non-energy combustion, but it needs to heat the reactor to start the reaction of ammonia production. And the second part of this 2B10 is specialized for non-selective catalytic reduction, which is one of the processes used for nitric acid production. As main three data sources is EU ETS data, Czech Statistical Office, and as caprolactam. Here are some country-specific data which are obtained directly from the caprolactam, from the facility who produce the caprolactam. But it's sometimes a little bit complicated to get those data from them, because they don't need to publish these data. It's on their own will if they provide the data or not. And the last part, which is mostly important for category 2B10, is provided by facility Cateco, or now Coneco, which is calculating, as I think was said earlier, parts from energy sector, and this is also important for the non-energy use in this category. As I have marked those data, Czech Statistical Office provide data for ammonia, ethylene, and vinyl chloride. This data only provide information about amount of the final product, or amount of the product during the previous year. And for these other categories, we have EU ETS data sources, which provides also emissions and also information about the production. And I don't know if I missed anything. And I wanted to say that all of these categories are based mostly on Tier 1 methodology. Only nitric acid is Tier 2, and ethylene is Tier 3, I think. But I'm not sure. Next is 2D category, which, as I said, it's non-energy product from fuel and solvent use. Here we have mostly these three categories as lubricants, paraffin wax, and other, which contains urea used as a catalyst mostly in diesel motors, but maybe we will have some changes here based on the ERT review. Let's see how it will turns out. But here we have also main data source Czech Statistical Office, which provides information about oils and solvent use in this category, and especially for the lubricant and paraffin wax. For the urea consumption, there are other specific data sources, but a lot of stuff is calculated from the energy sector, as is written there, from AD, from 1A, 3B, and also from the 2B, which is based on the ammonia production and other following stuff, also the natural gas consumption. And finally, we have last category, which belongs to me, which are fluorinated greenhouse gases. We have these four main calculating sheets, which is separate based on the type of the product. First is 2F1E, which contains mobile air conditioning. As data sources, we use data from COPERT, which is a calculating model provided by Center for Transport Research, which belongs under Ministry of Transport. These data are available during summer, and also other important data are provided by car factories present in the Czech Republic, which is Toyota Motors, Škoda, and Hyundai, which are mostly available during spring, and it's kind of yearly report amount of cars, new models, and properties of these new model cars manufactured in the Czech Republic. Another category is 2F from 2 to 6, which are mostly fire protection and foam blowing agents. Here we have data sources same for 2F1A to F without E, as I was speaking earlier. And there are important three data sources, which is ISPOP. In English, we can say Integrated System for Fulfilling the Reporting Duty, which provides information about the fluorinated greenhouse gases trading in the European Union. Another source is F-gas Register, which provides a trading system of fluorinated greenhouse gases outside of the European Union in the other countries, and custom data, which contains both, which is sometimes tricky because we need to check those three data sources against duplicities, and all those three data are provided by Ministry of Environment. But this year it was quite new. I was speaking with the custom office directly, and they provide these data, mostly the F-gas and custom data. And these data are available during September or October. And I forget to mention category 2F4A, which are inhaler propellants. And here we have data sources from State Institute for Drug Control. Here are information about amount of the medications which were sold during the previous year. And in the additional flyers of the direct medication, we can find the information about amount of F-gas in the direct inhalator or something like this. And thank you for your attention. This is all for me, and I'm waiting for your questions.
Do we continue with the second presentation and then have questions?
There we go.
Jak to funguje, jenom takhle dopředu?
Jo, a tímhle zpátky.
Jo. Okay, so hello there. So my name is Svoboda, and I am an expert for the 2A category, 2C category, and 2H as well. I want to just say that I'm fairly new in this business, so I also made this presentation in the way that I also will speak about the things what might be interesting in the view of a newcomer to this, like how it can be seen and what are the difficulties when you come into this sometimes very specific issues and problems, mainly with data mining and actually data sources, and how to actually maximize your outcome and utilize your time while working. So as I said, these are my categories. The 2E category is not that big in Czech Republic, so I will not speak about it much in this presentation. So this is about what I'm going to speak about. I've seen your presentation, unfortunately, just today early morning. So I added the first part, some statistics, because I've seen in your presentations that you guys had there a lot of graphs. So just to show you what is the situation in our country in the IPU sector, but I believe that you can read this. You can find our report online, and if you would be interested in details, you can find it there for sure. And then I'm going to speak about the data sources, categorizations issues, which are, especially in the 2C category, a big thing, some avoiding of overlaps, and therefore, and then other things. As I said, some of the last part will be about my point of view about how the things are interesting for the newcomer. So there are some statistics. As you can see, the IPU sector is pretty steady in the emission rate numbers. The main emissions comes from the 2C sector in our country, and pretty much as I said, I don't need to go through this that deeply, as you can easily go through that in our report, which is online. So this might be more interesting for you. So how we actually, what kind of data we use. So I just divided to these 4 categories. Some of them been mentioned already by my colleagues. So the first one is definitely direct communication with the companies, which might be the best option, especially when it comes to upgrade to the higher tiers. But sometimes it's also the problem, as the companies are not, they don't need to actually give you data if they don't want, as my colleague Zuzka said that as well. So here in Czech Republic, we don't really have the legislation power from our office to actually ask for the data from them. So it's more about the relationship with the certain people there, or the goodwill to actually cooperate. Then the Eurostat, or Czech Statistical Office. Again, like in Czech Republic, this is like a specific thing because it's another government office, but the Czech legislation doesn't allow this office to actually provide segregated data. So they actually provide only the aggregated data, which might be useful for lower tiers like tier 1, tier 2, but when it comes to tier 3, for the aggregated data are a little bit problematic, as you don't see what is behind, where it comes from, and so on. Then the other source is POP. It's like a Czech database actually run by the Czech Hydrometeorology Institute. This is a very good source, but unfortunately been created before the greenhouse gases inventory started. So some of the informations that are very useful for us, but if it would be also invented in a different way and added some special things for us, it would be as well easier. But as I said, this source is pretty good, and we can, especially for controls and for checks, we use it quite a lot, and that can be a very good double check for your outcome values. And the EU ETS as a last source in my field and in my categories is actually a big thing. Is the mineral industry is completely, or for example, lime and cement, they are completely counted and based on the EU ETS data. I actually spent the last half year researching and trying to figure out how this works completely and how it can be used and utilized for our needs. So if you guys would have any questions about this topic, this is probably one of the relevant thing I can speak about. So if I am not sure how much is implemented in Macedonia right now, but basically the EU ETS allowances are run by the Ministry of Environment in Czech Republic, and we actually created very good connection with the department, especially with one person there, and this guy cooperated with us very closely and helps us a lot to figure out a lot of things in our calculations. So again, even it's the government thing, the relationship, or let's say personal relationship with this person helps a lot, as it's it's a mutual communication and helps where we sort of helping each other with different things, and it helps us a lot. So about ETS I might talk a little bit more later, or you might ask if you would be interested. So categorizations in there. In our IPU sectors, this topic will be a little bit related with EU ETS data, as they have a different approach, and we sourcing some of our values from these data. So we need to be very careful how to actually categorize this data, because in EU ETS the companies, they don't really care much about how they categorize themselves. Their bigger issue or goal or task is mainly the final value, as based on this value they pay the money to the European Union and they pay for the allowance. So for them, the category sometimes is just something what they fill in, and they don't really care if it's completely correct. So the double check from our side must be done, and this is one of the things what we, for example, right now doing, and we actually communicating with that person at the ministry and trying to force the companies to improve the categorizations, that we can actually automatize the data sourcing from the EU ETS and not going through all of the different companies and check it if it's correct, but more really just implement some coding and get the data right away. What else I have there? Company, yeah, so that's what I said. So basically then the final categorization in IPU, it's based on the IPCC guidelines. Then it can be changed by review process, but the data source and the national specifics are very important. If you would look to different reports, I've seen, for example, that you guys cooperate with Austria. So if you would look at the 2C category, you might find out that the 2C category in Austria, it's completely different, or not completely different, but also the categorization of some emission are actually, it's different, might be also even in energy sector, some our product sector, or the IPU might be different ratio between these two. So the categorization really depends on the data source and the national specifics and so on. So, and as I said, then based on the IPCC guidelines and the review process and your specifics, you basically negotiate with the reviewers how you finalize and where you categorize some of the data and values. Avoiding overlaps. So that's the one thing which is very specific for especially the 2C category, where especially using of coke in this process is a typical thing for where you need to really be careful about overlaps. For example, I will use the example of what I've been dealing with recently, that in Czech we used in 2C category, we used this data mostly from the Czech Statistical Office. And we use the data about coke used in the industry. We didn't know where, or we don't know where it comes from, which companies. So we basically have one value for the coke used in blast furnaces. And that's very difficult for us then to actually go up to the tier 3, as we are now trying to do this and approach that tier 3 in the next year maybe. But first, to segregate the data was a big issue, and finally we sort of figure out how it is, and all it's sort of hidden in the coke and the additional let me start again. We found out that we have quite a big difference between the EU ETS values, what we want to use to actually upgrade us to tier 3, and our values from the Czech Statistical Office. The difference in the end was actually hidden in the different categorizations, and especially use the waste gases from the metal industry, from blast furnaces in other companies, and they've been not categorized in this 2C category in the EU ETS level, but they've been somewhere else, and it was sort of complicated for us to actually figure out how it's all done, and took me a few weeks and a lot of the discussions with experts from the industry to actually clarify what is that all about. So it's a little bit related with the categorization and overlapping problem when we sort of look at these, and we really need to be sure where the data comes from. I will leave this maybe if there is an expert who would be interested in this process I've been going through, he might contact me directly if he would be interested in this, and we can actually share experience about this, because the 2C category, I personally see it as the most complicated in the overlaps, especially for the use of coke, which is fuel and the reducing agent in the same time. So this is a little bit about the calculations I've been going through to trying to figure out where it comes from, as I've been talking about, when you're going through this kind of process, when you're trying to upgrade from one tier to another tier, and you have aggregated data in the previous calculations, then you're trying to find out what is the structure of the data, then you're trying to compare it with some new data you find, as the EU ETS data provides you the data straight from the company, so you see exactly what's happening there. Just one thing, the EU ETS data, the way how they express the data or how they present them, they might be very different from the company to company. Again, for them it's very important, the final value, and so some additional study and research must be done as well to figure out how it works, and if it's also categorized correctly, also in between the energy and IPU sector. So basically you go through the structures, the previous one, then you're trying to compare it, find the differences, and then find all the flows of the materials and the emissions to compare it. And as we managed in the end, we came to almost on a 93% same value, which is mostly based that the difference is because of the ETS data are generally lower, as the company is really trying to calculate as low as possible to don't pay enough money. So the aggregated data sometimes gives you a little bit higher values. So this is, I believe, the last slide I prepared. As you could hear from my talk, I still sometimes getting lost even in my thoughts, and like it's a very complicated thing, and I've been brought into this business, especially in the very interesting time when there was a hard lockdown and I was by myself in the office. I had Markéta just sometimes on phone and crying, "Hey Markéta, I don't know what to do, like what should I read? I'm completely lost." And so especially the start was difficult, as I find that some of the IPCC guidelines are good guidelines, but sometimes, especially when you come you new and you're trying to figure out how to go further and upgrade the tier, it might be quite complicated. So I would highly recommend, actually, what I found out a little bit, let's say 2 weeks too late. It's better to start to read the reports from the other countries, where you can actually figure out how the other countries are doing it. I believe this is also the reason why we actually meeting here right now, that the sharing of the experience, how to actually work with these IPCC guidelines and how it actually works in the real situation. That's the better approach, I would say, than trying to figure out and understand every single word in that guideline. Then the consistency of the work process I marked here or wrote here. I wrote here between former and current employees. Yeah, so just today I was trying to for 1 hour found out where one emission factor comes from a former worker who made that Excel sheet. So if there would be a little note that it comes from there, I would save 1 hour. So again, like, I would highly recommend to every team to make the notes and make their own guidelines to sort of for the newcomers, or even not just for newcomers, also for yourself. As myself, I also have other work, so I'm just part-time here. So when I come after few months to the same topic, if I have notes, I'm way faster, because some of the things you just do for 1 week, a year, and then you don't need to come back to it until next year or maybe half year later. So everything which I would call your personal guidelines to write it or make notes in your sheets, Excel sheets, are very, very helpful thing for every single calculation. Might make it way easier for you. It's pretty much like by the arrow down the bottom what I've been just talking about. Also the explanation of coding, what you do, and there are some links to the data sources and the IPCC format. That's pretty much what I've said. So I believe that was the last slide. Yeah. So as I said, the next expert, becoming an expert in the industry, 2A category, 2C, and the 2H as well. So if you have any questions right now, I will try to answer them. If I don't know the answer right now, I'm happy to help you by email, or we can connect in the future and share the experience. So that's pretty much everything from me. So thank you guys for your attention.
Thanks very much. That was helpful. And I think you make a really important point. It's very intuitive to talk about the drivers of the calculation, thinking through it in a structured way so that you can sort out the categorization. Markéta, you were formerly in IPPU. Is there anything you wanted to add from your experience after hearing your colleagues speak?
Yes. I think that it's really important to focus on the key categories, because the reviewers are also looking at these key categories, and they are always pushing towards the higher tiers methods. And also the Europe ESD reviewers are trying to push us towards the higher tier methods. That's the reason why in the category 2C metal industry, we are trying to start the calculations with the tier 3. Because it's the key category for us, and so far we are using only aggregated data, and it is really hard sometimes, as Shimon already said, to we have the aggregated data, it's easy part, but then look into it and get the detailed data and find the harmonization between these data is the hardest thing, I would say, for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, might maybe add one thing I didn't mention there, like that in the 2A category for 2A, for lime, cement, and glass, we basically use just the EU ETS data and compare it with the data from the industrial guilds. And basically, that's all tier 3. And the 2A4 category is a bit more complicated. There are more things in there, but most of it also calculated by the EU ETS data. 2C, we trying to transfer this direction. And 2H category is also calculated by EU ETS data, but there we actually investigate that a little bit. Now we're going through the investigations. It's been added, I guess, last year or the year before we added that there. Yeah, so.
Yeah, it's the these are the emissions from the paper industry, and it's not
Yeah, 2H1 to be specific. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so it's not. Yeah, it's a minor category, and I would also add that in the past for mineral industry we were using only the data from the Czech Statistical Office. It means this aggregated data, and then when the EU ETS data came, we started using the EU ETS data because it was quite easy, because the data, the ETS data and the Czech Statistical Office data are quite similar, and so it was easy to go from Czech Statistical Office data to EU ETS data. But it's not the same situation for the category 2C. It's more complicated.
It's complicated because the overlaps there, and especially using of the waste gases there in the blast furnaces, and using the usage of them in different companies as well. So to follow and investigate all this takes time, but once you get through that, it in the end makes sense. It's just like this aggregated data in the beginning, as we haven't seen the sources of that it made us some issues, like to figure out how to actually combine these two different sources.
Yeah, and sometimes it's quite like you are feeling like a detective.
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So questions?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the interesting discussion and presentation. I agree with you that we are more like detectives in this sector. It's most challenging for us as well, because you have different industry, different types of information from each type of industry. It was challenging for us in the previous inventories to ensure time consistency in the time series. So I have Well, one question, Zana, for the mobile air conditioning. You mentioned that you use copper to estimate this emission. I was interested to know a little bit more in this area. How do you use copper? Because in our case, we don't have disaggregated data for air conditioning. We report only stationary air conditioning because we use only the values for the import of F-gases that ministry has in their own registry. They don't have disaggregated data yet. They're planning to do, but don't have also performed that activity yet. So do you somehow exclude stationary air conditioning? How do you do that by using corporate? How to divide between these two categories? If you can explain a little bit more. And for Simon, I have a question about the iron that you mentioned and steel, that you somehow try to estimate the amount of coke used in processes. Where do you report that? Because in our case, we only have steel production, one installation that's steel production, electric arc furnace, and we report all the fuel consumption in the energy part because we don't want to overlap. We don't have the share which is used in the process. Actually, we only have information that they use limestone and dolomite in their processes, so we report that in the category 2A4 as other processes uses of carbonates. Do you include somewhere else this coke consumption in the processes if you have estimates for that? So for now, this will be from my side.
Thank you for the question. I don't think I'm able to answer you directly because COPERT is provided by the Center for Transport Research, which is placed in Brno. And the person who provides the COPERT and the data from this, from mobile air conditioning, it contains data about the amount of cars, about the emission system like Euro 1 to Euro 6 and some kind of stuff. It is on person who is called Leoš Pelikan, and he is responsible for these data, and we then apply those data from the transport to this category only for the
Yeah, maybe can
yeah.
It's like we basically get the data from the CDV, which is the amount of cars and the categorization of use types, as Zuzka said, like this Euro categorization according this Euro standard, and then we estimated for each Euro standard car how the percentage of air conditioning in these cars. So it means that for Euro Standard 6, we estimate that there is about 90% air-conditioned cars within this category type. And then we put all this together, and according to this, we calculate emission from stocks from mobile air conditioning. Is it clear?
Because we use copper to calculate emissions for road transportation, but I was interested to know how to use that tool to evaluate these emissions. But because we use IPCC software, and the activity data that we include in this software are only production, exports, and imports of these gases, air gases used for mobile air conditioning. So I was interested how to come to cooperate to have the activity data necessary for the software. So maybe we can discuss in the future when we have data for mobile air conditioning somehow calculated. If you have advice for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I believe it's my turn now. So the question was about the categorization of coke and how to actually work with this emission. I would, as I mentioned, from all the categories I'm responsible for, the coke is the most difficult thing, and basically, the other thing I mentioned, if you would look, for example, if you look at the near from Germany, Austria, Slovakia, and Austria, that's the four I actually look at. The ratio between the energy emissions and the IPU sector in 2C category and 1A, 2A, I believe, for the metal industry and energy, the ratio is completely different between these countries, and that's actually because it's related how they actually count the coke in their process. So because the coke, as you I guess know, I believe you know that it works as the fuel and the reducing agent in the same way, in the same time. So in our way, we're trying to calculate all coke used in the metal industry as a reducing agent. So our ratio then comes to something, actually we are 1 against 3, energy against the IPU sector. So, but in Germany, I believe it was Germany, it's a completely opposite, as they might calculate it the other way. They may use the coke, more as the fuel. They calculate as the fuel. So I don't really see that there is a really strict guideline for it. As in the IPCC, I understood the IPCC guideline to calculate the coke more as the reducing agent. Yeah, that's how I would actually interpret the IPCC guideline. But based on my little research in the neighboring countries, I would say it's not that strict. The bigger problem I see, it's to really need to be investigated. Like in our industry and in our companies, we have 2 big ones in the 2C category, and there are a few small ones. But the 2 big ones, they also have the additional heating plants, and also and that heat production actually makes a problem, as then not just the usage of coke, but also these waste gases from the blast furnaces are actually transported to different company, and there actually they produce some heat. You need to be very careful, especially when it comes to discount. You can really cooperate between the experts if there are differences for the energy sector and the metal industry, as this actually there is a big chance of doubling and overlapping of the data. And that was the main issue I've been investigating. It took me a while to figure out how it was actually meant before and how it's actually structured in the ETS data. So the coke, I would personally say it's a reducing agent, so that's an IPU sector. And I think the question was also how we actually get this data. For that, actually the aggregated data were better, because we actually could, from the statistical office, we could see directly the amount of coke used for the blast furnaces, and we used that number to basically calculate the emissions. If it's the EU ETS data, it's more complicated, because the reducing agents sometimes are displayed not as a value of the material and how much material being used, but sometimes it's as two numbers, like the content of carbon in the previous, in the iron in the beginning, and in steel as outcome. And this difference is counted in ETS and as an emission. So you don't really see how much coke was used in that case. You see the final emission, but you see it as the based on one component. I think for you guys will be very good if you have only one producer and you somehow manage to communicate directly with them, or even you get the aggregated data from the country about the coke used. Then it's clear that it's from from that company. If you get the data, coke used in the blast furnace, because coke is obviously used also in different industries. And then the second part of the question was about limestone and dolomite. We see the limestone and dolomite, and I believe in other countries it's similar, as a reducing agent. So we actually calculated in the 2C category. This one we already since 2011, I believe, we calculate by the EU ETS data, as these values and these emissions are very simply to be found there. So we calculate them through the EU ETS data. So basically we combine different approaches. So, and now we're trying to move towards the EU ETS data completely. You said that you have it in 2A4 category. I personally see the 2A4 category and the lime usage more as a desulfurization in the energy sector. Used in the energy sector, which is a bit different process. This is more like I would call it a clearing process of the energy sector, and the limestone and dolomite, I believe, in the metal industries, I would see it more as a reducing agent being used there to really to produce some particular or some specific steel. So I would actually leave, and we have it that way, and don't have any questions about that, about the limestones, like that it would be somewhere, should be somewhere else. We had some different issues with calculation of the limestone dolomite previously, but we deal with that. But it was not about the categorization. We have it in 2C1, and it's accepted by reviewers without any problem. So I don't know if it was, guys, good answer. Or you want to?
In our case, because in the IPCC software, I don't know if you have a chance to see how it works. The only option to enter as an activity data for 2C1 category is the amount of steel or iron produced and the emission factor. So you don't have option to put as an input data fuels that are used as a in the processes. So that's why we reported under 2A, maybe not 5 other categories where we specify from which branch it comes, because it's connected to other category like metal industry, but we reported there to be covered, to be included in IPPU sector, not in other sectors. That's why we put there the use of.
It makes sense completely, as there are different emission factors.
Don't have option. Don't have. I don't know how it's done in the CRF tables, but in IPCC software there is no option to add another. Only the active cells are only steel production or iron production and the emission factor for that process.
Yeah.
Just if you don't mind, I can jump in. The problem basically that we have here is also that the coke to coal ratio is not defined, and the amount of coking coal used for iron and the steel industry is not taken as a non-energy use of fuel, is not reported like that in the energy balance. So basically what we have is the amount. We are not excluding the coking coal. We still have coking coal in the energy balance. It's not excluded as a non-energy use, and it's not reported by the companies as a process emission.
The only data that we have on coke consumption in industry is only from the energy balance. So that's why we reported on the fuel consumption in energy. The only coke consumption in industry. So, but that is included as a fuel consumed in energy because we don't have information about how it's used in the specific process. But it's not non-energy, but it's included less like an energy fuel consumption.
Yeah, I would see there a little bit like an issue is like that the coke in that process definitely plays slightly different role as the emissions emitted from actually the steel productions are also like by the how is this word, like shaping or improving the quality of the steel, and that emit the carbon, right? So like there, I don't know about that software. We don't use it, so I don't know. So then you definitely limit it by that. I would definitely say in that case, I agree with your decision to move the dolomite and limestone to different category, as they have a different emission factors completely. And we actually deal with that we mixed that coke and the dolomite a little bit together. I believe there is coke is like 2.6 emission factor and the dolomite is like 0.7 or something. I don't know, I might be wrong. But basically it's a big difference between the emissions factors. So to mix these definitely would not work. And if you don't have an option to do this input separately, then just if you have a chance to put it to A4, that makes sense, as also the lime is there included to very similar, not similar process, but it's there included for other process, so why not? Yeah, the importance I see in the, as I said again, I will repeat myself now, if you really look through the different reports from different countries, you find out that the metal industry can be very specific, and it really depends on the data sources you have. That was also in my presentation there, that's basically what actually make your categorization and where exactly the emission is really depends on the options you have. It's the guideline in some ways say something, but in the end, like the importance is it doesn't miss. It's still there, and then when the review question comes, we had a couple of review questions about this. I think it was with using of urea as well. Why we have it there? It's mostly about like say because we have this data from here, and they are together with they are same data as they come together with a lime. So there's the nitrification and the sulfurization, for example. This question came, and our answer can be easily like, because we have this data aggregated, so we report it together. So I would say it this way, like if you have I would not be really concerned much about if it should be there or not. It's more about what options are. Yeah, and like, I don't know if it makes sense what I just say now. Would you add something?
Yeah, I think that your approach is really legit. Like if it's if the software and your options are like to only have it under the energy sector, then it's better to have it under energy sector than not report it at all, I would say.
Okay, thank you. I have just one more question referring to the EU ETS. As we are still not EU country, we do not have this introduced in our country. There were some efforts that did not go very well. But I was wondering who collects EU ETS data? Is it the Ministry of Environment? Which institution is responsible in your country for collection of this data? Whom the installation report to and send?
Yeah, that's a very good question. If you guys will get to the situation that the EU ETS data will be introduced into your country, as the report team be there. Because that's a very good source of the data and will make your life way easier. As you get correct data which goes through many controls. As there's in this moment, I believe that 1 ton of CO2 equivalent is paid 50 euros. So you can imagine how much money is it for big companies and how many controls are done, and actually researches for the emission factors and all these things. So back to your question, it's made by the Ministry of Environment. We managed to get, and there is a department, I think it's
emission trading system.
Emission trading system. Ministry of Emission Trading System. So if anything like that will start in your country, try to be right there and get the contact with these guys and raise your hand, guys, we are here and we would like to cooperate and use this data as well for us. As we just actually made this connection this year closer. It was done like before, obviously, but this year we cooperate a little bit more. And it was very helpful so far. So we are now, for example, trying to discuss with them some changes in the waivers, like in the reports, like from the companies, which are collected by the Ministry of Environment, and we're trying to propose what we would need for our reports. As I mentioned in my presentation as well, if that would be done correctly, or in, let's say, in better way for us, we could actually apply just some coding and just get this data right away in the final value without actually much working, copy paste and things like that. But that especially when this going to be introduced into your country, if it will be, then there I would highly recommend you to try to be there and to have a word like how about the structure and some questions in that, and maybe just how the macros would work and what will be the outcome, as that might be very helpful.
Yeah, and I would add that we started to communicate with the Ministry of Environment more closely because one of our duties towards the European Union is to also report the amount of ETS emissions and categorized according the CRF categories. And that's the thing that we aren't still able to do, like to say which ETS emission belong where. So that's why we started to communicate with the Ministry of the Environment more closely.
Thank you so much. That was all from our side regarding this session.